Brown from X Team, and welcome back to the KMFCast. Super excited about this episode because we're doing Python, and Python is just such an interesting language, and we're going to dive into how versatile it is and how using Python in so many different ways in the web. But we have some awesome X Teamers that I want to introduce. So I'm going to bring in Victor here. I'm gonna bring in everyone. Hey, Victor, thanks for being here. Gonna bring in Antonio and Mirko.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hello.
Thanks.
Very nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks to all three of you for being here. And I'm gonna put this up on the screen, arrange this a little bit. There we go. Well, thanks for all three of you for being here. Going to chat about some Python, which I'm excited about. And maybe, like I said, we'll just start with some quick introductions, just telling us kind of a little bit about yourself, maybe your kind of overall experience with software development, maybe even specifically Python, if you like. Why don't we start with Antonio? Why don't you start with the introduction?
Okay. Yeah. So, hey, guys. So, my name is Antonio. I am a data engineer here at X Team. I work for a client based in Arizona, almost 1 year right now. So I have past experience in a bunch of areas. I started with software engineer, then passed by data scientist, and now I'm working as a data engineer. And the curious about that is all using Python.
Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, like I said, thank you for being here. Victor, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
So I'm also a data engineer in X Teams. I've been working with Python for the last 5 years, maybe, when I turned into the data world. But even before that, I knew a little bit of Python to automate simple tasks in my daily life. I began as a software engineer, but once I got into the data realm, Python ruled, and I've been here since then.
Awesome. Makes sense. And Mirko, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So I'm a software automation engineer. I started as a software engineer, and I use Python to develop some APIs, thanks to Django REST framework. And I moved then to the automation side of the things because I used to consume Python application through pipelines, and to say that better, from GitLab pipelines.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, then without further ado, I think we can just jump into it, and starting with kind of the versatility of Python. I think all of us, we discussed it a little bit in the Slack before we jumped on here, but that's something that I've always known, and I think something that Python is known for, sort of, is just being used. We were talking about machine learning. Anytime you're looking for a web scraper, that's usually the first thing you see. So I just thought it would be interesting to kind of cover some ways you've seen Python used out there, some ways that you've used Python. And I also think it'd be interesting, maybe for folks that aren't that familiar with Python, to talk a little bit about why Python is used in so many different ways, whereas other languages maybe aren't. So if someone wants to take that away with any one of those talking points, you're welcome to.
May I begin?
Please, yes.
Yeah, sure.
So since I talked about it, Python usually is the de facto standard when you want to create a small script to automate something. I haven't seen any area that Python doesn't have at least something in it. Even game development, IoT, machine learning, web development, desktop application, you name it. You can build something with Python. And I believe that it is so flexible because it was built to be extensible by design. So there is this PEP, Python Improvement Proposals. We're going to talk about more of it when we talk about code style and stuff. But if anybody new on Python, or somebody that doesn't know it that well yet, go to PEP 1 and you understand what Python's all about. The extensibility, and you be able to do whatever you want to do with the language. There are no black box in it. That can be a drawback depending on how you do stuff.
Yeah.
But that's why it's so nice. And there is the simplest syntax I've ever seen. That gives him the strong whatever it needs to create simple stuff. Where doesn't matter what your background is. That's why I think it's so well received by everybody. What do you guys think?
Yeah, what do you two think?
100%.
Yeah, yeah, I agree 100% as well. Especially because Python is very handy when it comes to string manipulation, data manipulation, files manipulation. It's very handy. I love that. It's also true that it takes something for granted, like the low typing and so on, but it's very, 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 very performant for such kind of things. So I agree.
Yeah. And I think it's simple as well. Like anyone that is known software engineer related could go and see some samples in the internet and understand, and you try it by yourself. So
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, I mean, do you think that kind of that simplicity is part of why it is used in so many different realms and different areas? Yeah.
Definitely.
And then, so a question or something that I heard a lot, like 10 years ago or so, was when people were saying, like, if you want to be a software developer and you want to jump into a language, what's the best one or what's a really good one? And back then, people said Python. Do you think now, literally a decade later, do you think that's still pretty true?
Yeah, I think so.
It's even more.
Yeah.
Go for it. Sorry, Rico.
Yeah.
Yes. As I said at the beginning, it takes something for granted, but the sacrifice is a little because you get immediately into the job and you can achieve very good goals in few time.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Cool. And then sorry, Victor, do you have something else?
I have something to add.
Please.
I believe it's even more than 10 years ago because one of the drawbacks in Python, there are a few, of course, every language has its drawbacks. But one of the Pythons is dependency hell. So the dependency tree can get messy really quick.
Yeah.
So back 10 years ago, 2012, it was more common to have very big and complex systems, and the dependency around it could be tricky. Now that we are talking in distributed environments, distributed systems, you can encapsulate a small tree of dependencies, and every system has its own tree. So, and in a containerized environment, Python began to shine it more and more and more. So I would argue that if 10 years ago was a great language to start, now it's even greater.
Yeah. That's cool to hear, and I think that's also good because I think that some folks are almost intimidated to get into software development and tech, because it's just so fast paced, and so there's actually something comforting. There's something nice about the fact that we can go over a decade and even beyond that, and still have a language that's obviously it's changing and evolving, but it's still Python. I think that's nice.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then that is a good kind of transition into the next one, which is it's so versatile that things like Django are very popular frameworks. So I did want to talk about some frameworks because I know that Django obviously is the kind of the go-to when you're talking about frameworks with Python, but there are more. So I just wanted to talk about sort of your experiences with Django, and also is it Django REST for APIs you had mentioned before. So I wanted to dive into that and just learn a little bit more about that and how it's being used. And then, like I said, I think it'd be nice if we can just kind of touch on some other frameworks that are a little smaller than something like Django. So if anyone wants to take it off with their kind of experience with frameworks or Django or something like that, that'd be great to hear from you.
Yeah, I can talk about my experience. Cool. I used Django in a telco company, which was pretty big. And all the business logic oriented to providing customer services was written in Python and Django. So we provided APIs, we exposed APIs to trigger this business logic. Yeah. So I think that Django, together with Django REST API, framework is a very, very powerful and flexible toolkit. It is based on the MVC, with the Model View Controller design pattern, even though the terminology could be a bit misleading, because in Django we do have templates, which refers to the views concept of the pattern, and the views that we have in Django refers to the controller concept that we have in the MVC pattern. But it's definitely worth to use that, because especially in large, I would say, in large scale projects, it fits very well, because it comes up with already something like the authentication layer already there out of the box and ready to be used, supporting the open authentication, and it provides the object serialization within the ORM. So it's perfect in this sense. For less complex projects, I would use something a bit more, plug and play like WebPy. But for large scale projects, definitely Django.
Yeah, Victor,
I want
please.
to be next. I want to be
Yeah,
next.
please.
I want to bring some of the comments.
Absolutely, yeah.
Felipe Barbosa said that he likes Flask framework. I started with it. I actually have little experience with Django. I have more experience with Flask, and I also love it because the micro framework way of doing things got me in the beginning, by the start. And I would also like to mention an honor framework called Fast API. Fast API, it's very, very, very nice. It gives us out of the box a lot of things. One of my favorite ones, documentation. And it creates a Swagger documentation like that. You don't even need to think about it. And the combination of Fast API and SQL Alchemy, it's my favorite one until by now. But I wouldn't in any moment give Django a second. It's like they are, what would I say? For different contexts, I wouldn't choose one or the other.
Yeah,
they are awesome, both of them.
I used Django for a small project, one of the past companies that I worked with, and the thoughts that I have about that time is like Django's like a full package, You have the ORM, you have the UI interface you can build in there, and you can create everything. So if it's not like me, is a good UI guy, you can go for Django and create something really quick to do some MVP or some POCs.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense. And then, I mean, we had talked about a couple other ones, but there seem to be, when I was looking into it a little bit, because I've written a little bit of Python, but it's been a while. But I mean, it is nice. It seems like because the community is so large and there's been so much time, there does seem to be like very niche frameworks for doing things. Like I saw frameworks just for crawling and things like that. So that to me just spoke a lot to the kind of community in general. Like, it's so specialized and niche that that a lot of the problems that folks are running into, there's just dedicated solutions out there by typically open source. Really nice community is what I was saying.
Yeah, true.
Awesome. Yeah. So we were getting a lot of comments. This is good. I'm trying to toss a couple on the on the screen here. But yeah. Good stuff. And then, so something I try to do in the KMFcast, other than just kind of, chat about languages in general and experience, I do like to try to give any kind of tips and advice. There are, kind of more junior devs that will tune in sometimes. And so I did think when we were chatting about all the things that we could cover, I really did like that we were talking about, what to do before you've even written a single line of code with Python. So, practices for writing and maintaining clean and readable Python code. So I just thought the three of you could chat about, your kind of experiences and how I often like to phrase it is what you wish you had known before you had started, some tips and advice. So again, anyone that wants to be first, you're more than welcome to give your experience.
Yeah, well, I would like to start from the definition of done. So what is the definition of done, especially in an agile environment? Usually I heard It works as expected, and that's it. But this doesn't necessarily mean that the work is completed. From my point of view, as an experienced developer, work is completed when someone delivers clean code as part of a task, of a coding task. Especially, this takes effect more in large projects. And let's say why? Because delivering the code base in a clean way is easier to read and understand, and it's in a way an easier work. It makes easier work, easier life for other developers, but for ourselves as well. Because when I come back after weeks and I didn't see the code base I wrote, and I want to make sense of that, if I wrote that in a clean way, I could make sense immediately. Otherwise, it takes longer, of course. And saying so, the code base is easier to maintain long terms.
Absolutely.
For me, the definition of clean code is exactly that. It needs to work properly, and it needs to be extensible, and it needs to be easily understandable. And those characteristics get even harder to achieve when you are working in a team. So, for instance, to come an agreement on the style standard that we are going to follow, even though there are maybe somebody doesn't agree with something or something else, if you have a standard throughout your code base in general, doesn't matter if you agree or not with that standard, you're gonna understand the code faster than if there wasn't any standard. So there comes the famous Python improvement proposal number 8, which gives us the code style. What's the word? Code style
guide, probably code style guide.
That's the word. That's the word.
Yeah.
Code style guide from the community. So a lot of smart people came together and figured out that. So just use it. It's easy, and it is easy to use it, because not only maintaining a clean and readable code, it's about coming together and having standards. Also, you can automate a lot of your tasks to do clean code and to make sure that code is actually clean. For instance, one thing that I would like to know before, in the beginning of Python, is to create Git hooks to make sure that I wasn't publishing anything crappy. And one of the de facto standards in the Python community, and even other communities, other languages communities, it's a tool library, it's difficult to say, called pre-commit. It's a tool written in Python, but you can create Git hooks in whatever language you like. It's very common to have in shell scripts. And you can reference repository in GitHub, and you can use a hook created by the community in your project, and that would make sure that you're not pushing anything to the central repository that isn't what everybody agreed upon. So that's one thing that I would like to know even beforehand. And also dependency health stuff, virtual environment. Coming from other languages and trying to understand virtual environment is not trivial.
We're definitely going to get into that a little bit on the next slide. But Antonio, anything you want to add to this topic?
I think you both cover everything, but the writing and maintaining it's very important. I think that when I started, if I know if you like, it's obvious, but when you name your variables and methods and functions, if you like give specific names and things that are meaningful, and with that, and you join with the PEP8 and use both together, you have really clean codes and easy to understand.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. And this is a comment from the topic before, but I still wanted to cover it. I thought it was an interesting question, and obviously kind of a personal opinion, but obviously based on your experiences. If you were learning one of these first, Django or Flask, is there one that you would suggest first?
No, out of context, I wouldn't.
Yeah, right. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
won't go wrong with either of them. You won't go wrong with either of them. But without a context, are you trying to apply to a specific job? And if so, do you know which framework does they use?
Sure. Yeah.
Are you trying to build a big complex systems, Django? If you are trying to do a small systems, maybe Flask.
Yep.
If you want to get prepared for the most common framework, maybe Django. If you want to go in hotter environments they are trying something new, Flask maybe, or even Fast API. Without a without contextualization, no way I can answer that.
Sure. But yeah, you answered the follow-up that I was going to have is what scenarios, what situations would you use one versus the other, and that's exactly what you answered. So I appreciate that. But yeah, like I said, I love that people are asking questions, so I just wanted to answer them in real time if we possibly can. But yeah, good stuff. A lot of great Python folks in the comments. We love it. And then we can move on. Again, I labeled this as proper dependency management, but often referred to as dependency hell. Kind of the same format as the last one. Again, I wanted to have this middle section of our discussion focused on just kind of advice and tips and tricks. But obviously, it can get pretty messy with dependencies. So I wanted to again ask the three of you just some tips and tricks that you've learned over the years of managing it, so it's a little less stressful.
I am already talking too much. Go, guys, please.
Yeah, Antonio, do you have anything?
I can talk a little bit. As I work more as a data engineer in the data side, like machine learning and stuff, I don't have too much problem with dependencies. Yeah. But a nice framework that I learned the past few months, it's called Poetry. And in that, it's like you have NPM and Yarn for JavaScript, right? So Poetry solves basically the same problem. Then we can we have this file that we have all your libraries and dependencies in there, and you can manage all your local environment and when you are developing. And when your application is ready to go to production, you can take a look at your dependency file in there and say, yeah, that's good. So move it away. So it's a nice tool that I learned in the past few months.
Nice.
Recommend it.
That's great. Mirko, anything?
Well, yeah, speaking about dependencies, I saw many times projects without pinning dependencies into the requirements of the projects. It's good in a way. Yeah. In a way, because once you upgrade, you kind of ensure to always keep up to date the dependencies of your project, but it could end up in, incompatibility because of the latest release of something is not anymore compatible with something else that was already there. So yeah, I would encourage to always pin versions of dependencies in a project in order to gain control about what a specific version of a dependencies provides to a project or how it interacts with other dependencies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Victor, talking is good, so please. I
wanna bring a discussion. I want fire. So, do you guys, Antonio and Mirko, do you guys think that requirement.txt is still relevant today?
I think so.
Well, if you have any other better alternative, I'm open to
better
that.
Than nothing, right?
Yeah. So I am Python requirement txt. It's the de facto standard, but I don't like it very much because two things. First, you can give a dependency without the version, as Mirko said, and it doesn't keep track of dependencies, and there where it's come dependency hell. maybe one library depends on a library, and you try to put another library into the project that depends on the first library that the first one, but
Yep.
with different versions, and then things break and you don't have a clue why. And that's why I like poetry, because not only it gets the version of the library that you're installing right now, but also keeps track of the dependencies of the dependencies. And I believe
Mm.
poetry is a good tool because not only it kept the standard of the community with PEP 5.8 something, I forgot, about the pipe project, .toml, you know? I
Mm-hmm.
forgot which number of the PEP was this. But not only this, but it was well received by the community, different than pipenv. Even though a lot of people still use pipenv, is not that common. And it pipenv that created that requirements.ini, which in turn builds the requirement txt with the dependencies, and but you wouldn't be able to mess with the requirements txt. I forgot. I actually forgot. Do you remember those?
I think it's
Uh,
something like that, but I'm
I
not sure.
heard about that, but you were right when it comes to inner dependencies. You are definitely right. Sometimes it's very hard to investigate and troubleshoot what's not going well there. And yeah, that keeps an eye. I mean, that requires a very detailed investigation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
So I would argue requirements txt, we all love you. You've been part of Python history, but now poetry rules. If you're starting a new project, please, poetry.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
We also just got a comment. I haven't heard of it. I just googled it. Python Anaconda. Are you familiar? I want to answer all
Yes.
these questions, but I didn't know how relevant it was here.
To be honest, I heard, but I never used it.
Use
I,
it.
I
Yeah,
used,
nice.
I used. It's nice. It's nice for environment handling. For quicker things, I do prefer virtualenv, honestly. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's another good option, Anaconda.
Awesome.
I worked a little bit with Anaconda since I began in the data science and analytics kind of area, and Anaconda uh, for those who doesn't know, it's like a Python distribution with other things with it. So Anaconda actually is Python with already a lot of data science dependency tools like NumPy, like Pandas, like Seaborn, and other stuff. So for a beginning data scientist that's gonna need to create a lot of things in a full environment and wants to start right away, maybe it's good. I don't like Anaconda. I like Miniconda. It's like Anaconda, but without all of those dependencies installed. Because Anaconda can be very big, and you're gonna install a lot of dependencies packages that you might not even use.
Yeah.
So that's it. And
Agree.
the dependency tool, the dependency management tool called Conda. It's very nice because you not only can install Python dependencies, but also system dependencies. For instance, binaries to that NumPy, which is a very computational heavy package, needs. That's not about Python; it's about C. And there are times, even especially for Mac users, the package doesn't build well with Xcode. And if you get to install with Conda, it gets your life much simpler. But it's very specific to the data science environment. So I like to use Conda. Uh, 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 I like to use Conda for a beginner. And
Yeah.
even though I wouldn't recommend, if you're gonna start from the zero, I would recommend starting to create stuff in Python in Colab, Google Colab, or something, or some other platform like that, where you don't need to install Python or packages directly at your machine. And once you get familiar with how to manage those environments, then you install in your local machine. And I wouldn't recommend installing Python directly. I would recommend installing Python with PyEnv. And in PyEnv, you can install the MiniForge, which is a open source distribution from Conda. And there you can have Conda and Python, but manage in the right way for your local environment. So
Got it.
Anaconda, yeah.
Yeah.
Miniconda, better.
You don't want to mess up with system Python, right? Especially in Linux distributions, right?
Yeah.
And you're gonna need it.
This is interesting to me though. So, but like Anaconda and even Conda, things like that, they do come with something like a modified version of Python. It's almost like its own like a Linux distro would be. Like it's kind of a tweaked version.
Something like that.
Okay, cool.
So
Cool.
Anaconda and Miniconda come with Python.
Yep.
Conda comes with both of them, and it's the dependency management.
Got it.
And in Conda, it's able to install not only Python packages but also system libraries.
Got
That's
it. Which then I imagine that, which kind of relates to our next thing, but I imagine that they don't Python, new versions of Python will come out and the Anaconda version will kind of be on a older version of Python. Is that true? Or can you upgrade Python along with Anaconda?
No,
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Either have one or the other. For instance,
Yep.
Even though requirements.txt kind of work with Conda, it's not very good. You need to create an environment.yaml to manage the environment with Conda. And usually when you are building a project, you're gonna either choose one or the other. I tried to use both because a project that I was building had some system dependencies and I liked Conda to use that, but I already loved poetry and tried to use both, and that didn't went well. So
yeah, gotcha. Well, that's good to know. Anyone watching at home, that's good advice. That's life learning. So then another one that was interesting was, and I was kind of talking about it a little bit on the last one, was maintaining an updated version of Python. And one of you shared a really interesting link which I hadn't seen before, which was, I forget the format of the URL. It was like endoflife.date/Python. And it showed you kind of the whole kind of essentially the roadmap and things like that of where Python is. But I can imagine, especially if you're working on a big project in Python, it probably is kind of difficult to keep things updated. But perhaps I'm wrong. Like I said, I haven't written Python in a while. So just wanted to chat a little bit about maintaining updated versions and making sure that your product doesn't have an old version of Python. So any tips and tricks? Or I also want to chat about things you run into when you're upgrading Python, that might break an app, something like that.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult to keep it updated, definitely, but you have to. Just to remember some facts that happened in the past. In the 1st of January 2020, Python 2.7 was discontinued. And last year, December 31st, Python 3.6 reached the end of life. So I would like to say why it is really necessary to update Python. I think we can summarize this in 3 points. First one, because otherwise you don't get any new feature. And of course, we want to add new features in our software as much as possible when it is required. No bug fixes anymore, and this could turn into trouble. But last and not least, the biggest trouble is that we don't get any more security issues. And all of us know what happened with Log4j, right? We remember. So I would say we could have 2 approaches here. First one is, if you're gonna make a new project, if you're going to start a new project, we will just use the latest version of Python available, and that's it. If we're dealing with another project which is already existent, and it is of course maintained, it's not legacy or kept this apart, we have to unfortunately upgrade that. and we can have an hub there thanks to unit tests or integration tests and end-to-end tests, if applicable, of course, that would guarantee that nothing breaks in between the upgrades. So I would always encourage to write software which is first of all testable and coming with tests along with. So this is in one side, and in another side, I know that this is a good challenge. It's very effort. It's not effortless. So I'm sorry to say that, but we need to upgrade, and I would wish that upgrade process will become a bit more structured organization-wise. So it could be a regular process that is going to be run as part of an important task.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Antonio, Victor, anything on making sure those things are updated? And like I said, yeah, issues you could might run into along the way.
I actually agree with Mikro. You need have to ask yourself why I need this updated. If it was not like if it has not, for example, I think I read yesterday or so that the new version of Python will be a lot of improvements on performance. So when it's something like that, like it's a huge changes, maybe worth it to update everything and make a workforce to do that. But we don't have too much to do automated stuffs right now, because I think most of the languages this way, right?
Yeah.
I totally agree with Mirko. There is no free lunch. If you have a software that you are confident that if something breaks, you will know, then it doesn't matter if you are trying to add a new feature, if you're trying to change a new feature, if you're trying to upgrade a version of a library or trying to upgrade a version of Python. You will be confident that the change won't break anything. And if you don't have unit testing, stress testing, end-to-end testing, and stuff like that, of course, you don't need to test every single thing, only the things that matter. But you need to have those tests so that whenever you change something, you are going to be comfortable knowing that if something broke or not. So there is no free lunch. You have to have tests.
Yeah. That totally makes
another
sense.
thing I would like to add is that someone could be misled because using some Linux distribution which provide long-term support could think, okay, I'm in a safe area here. I can forget about upgrading Python because, of course, the security upgrades will come across the distribution. But yeah, it's true in a way. But from the other side is that the distribution couldn't cover all the whole house of packages of Python. So it could fix something most widely used, but not all of them. So, and also no bug fixes and no new features as well. So.
Yeah, good stuff. And so it says we're going to wrap up, but just since we touched on it, we have a little bit of time. We were talking about like I said, we touched on testing and things like that. But one of our bonus questions or topics that we had discussed was unit tests and things like that. I think Mirko, you're the one that brought that up in the Slack. Just wanted to see if there's anything before we wrap up that you wanted to cover in terms of that. Yeah, you had talked about kind of PyTest and test coverage, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So first of all, we need to give the definition of what's unit, because when we often talk about unit tests, right? And okay, I see unit tests covering huge modules of Python. So first of all, what's the definition of unit? Because it's subjective anyway. We can discuss about that, and sometimes we end up having a team decision about what's unit. For me, personally, unit is a function where we use very widely functions across classes and Python modules. So when it comes to create a unit test, it means I want to test a function with a certain input, and I would expect that it would end up having a certain output. So this is what's unit for me. For other people, unit could be a set of functionalities provided by a class rather than business logic affecting many functions. Okay, there is room to discuss, but this is, I mean, for me, the granularity of the unit is a single function. And afterward comes to the integration test, where usually we test how the different Python modules would interact together. And usually we then end up with end-to-end tests where we do test how different systems would interact together. So this is an overview about what's testing, and it applies to Python, of course. And yeah, a good library, it's PyTest we used across Python, and it's very good. It could be also possible to cable these within talks, which is a good, let's say, Python utility with which it's possible to test against all our code base, but with different environments. So let's say I want to give support to all Python 3, and I want to give support. I want to ensure to give support through all the Python 3 releases. That means I do support 3, 6, 7. Okay, 6 I'm not anymore because it's basically decommissioned, but I want to support from 3, 7 onwards. Okay, I do prepare then a specific talks which aims to cover tests, to run tests against 3.7, 8, 9, and 10, which is the latest available version of Python while speaking. Another good library is coverage and coverage badge as well. Basically, it would report about the coverage that we are providing through unit tests coming along with a Python application. It's nice because once it runs, it builds a output in console, giving us evidence about the coverage, what are the lines of code which require coverage and weren't covered yet, and gives you percentage of coverage as well. It also gives you some HTML reports, which are nice to see. The good thing is that if we cable all the things together, I didn't say this earlier, but in order to check that an application is PEP 8 compliant, we have very good tools like Flask8. And we have other tools like iSort, Black, which is a formatter. iSort is used for the sorting of the imports. If we stick all together, so the checks with the code style and the code linter, together with tests, I think that we gain a very good control of our code base and of our software we are aiming to deliver to the end customer. So this could be even staffed all packed all together in a pragmatically process running either at, as it was said by Victor, pre-commit hooks, or at pull request building time, which is even more powerful in my opinion, because in order to enable the hooks, you need some adjustments, some configuration at the real beginning of the work. So locally, you need to set up something manually. While within the PR buildings, I mean, you were forced there. You don't have any chance. You couldn't escape.
Totally agree, and would like to add MyPy to get type hinting.
Yeah.
If you get MyPy, Black, Flake8, iSort, all checked by pre-commit, you're gonna have to try to make something doesn't work. So that's very good quality code. Also, I would like to respond some comments. I was
gonna throw some up there too. How about this one? You want to look at this one? Virtual.
First, I'm gonna answer. I want to answer this, but I would like to answer Brandon Diaz about remembering which PEP was about the Pi project. This one. Thank you, Brandon.
Absolutely.
So, virtual live alternative to Conda. they are actually very similar. They both share a feature that I personally doesn't like that much. That they don't put the environments in the project folder. They create a folder within your home, a dot folder, and
Mhm.
put the environment there. And so you couldn't create multiple environments with the same name. For example, I have project A and project B. Both of them would create a virtual environment with VMF, but that wouldn't be feasible because since they both are in the same folder, both virtualenv and Conda wouldn't know which one you're talking about. So you're gonna start to create very big and complex virtual environment names. And this is one of the features that I like in requirements DXT. VEnv, which is not virtualenv, is something different. Python and poetry. Poetry also does this in the project folder. So virtualenv, I would say virtualenv it's similar to venv, and they try to automate a lot of things like starting the virtual environment when you jump into the folder in your file system. That's
Mm.
nice, but the features that I don't like makes me doesn't like that much. But that's me. And
Yeah.
Conda is similar to that, but it adds the pro of you being able to manage system libraries, which is so good. But I would I would still go with poetry.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to
I'll
throw
give it a
this one.
shot.
Oh, yeah. Perfect. I wanted to throw that one on the screen here too. Just how you can tell if a library is compatible with your version of Python is a question we got in the comments.
How can I? No, if I is compatible with my Python. Well, you don't need to.
Yeah,
When you
exactly.
have when you
Good news.
when you use a dependency management system like pip or poetry or conda, they usually take care of this.
Mhm.
Some take care more than others. Pip doesn't care much about the dependencies of other dependencies. This is where it's not that good, but it was the first try and it was king until now. Conda has a very thorough dependency tree management, so it checks everything and it's very nice, but it can get slow because it also checks system dependencies and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And poetry, it's the fastest one, and that's one of the reasons why I like it, like it most. But answering your question, you don't have to. You just need to use a good dependency management tool.
Nice.
True story. I like this to check this programmatically. That's true. Another resource could be reading documentation because, for instance, Django doesn't come to be compatible with all the versions of Python. So it's clearly stated in the page of the project with which Python versions it is compatible.
Cool. Well, I was definitely happy that we were able to answer some questions. I can toss this one on. We have a little bit of time.
Portfolio experience advice to enter your awesome Python. I actually have a case with this.
Yeah.
Yes, it didn't got into the team, but I have a friend that has a little close to none development experience.
Yeah.
But he works as a salesperson in a dependency company, in a software company. So it sells software, and he wanted to make a move into the development, and he reached out to me so I could help. And the first thing I said is, what do you do that you don't need to think? It's boring, takes a lot of time, and is repetitive. If you find this in your daily life, that's the first thing you want to try to automate. And Python, as we said, is perfect for that. And you can give a very good start at trying to develop something that is meaningful, because that's one of the pitfalls for starting in development. I still go for this. It's putting the technology before the problem you're trying to
Hmm.
solve. So
Hmm.
you have this beautiful system, a lot of dependency management and software automation and stuff like that. But you lost track of what you're trying to accomplish. When you get a problem yourself, your problem, you hate what you do. Like, I don't want to do it anymore. You don't lose track of it.
Yep.
So
True. I have a nice case
Yeah,
about that too, but go ahead.
it
so
happened to me as well.
we're building a scrapping tool for local use, not web development, not nothing
Hmm.
like that. It's an actual single Python file, and he's putting everything in it because he's learning stuff. He's using Beautiful Soup, and he's actually doing stuff. He's actually solving his own problems. And just to show that I actually solve a problem, improve my productivity with this code that I built myself,
Hmm.
there's nothing better than that. We are
Yeah.
problem solvers. We're not coders. We're engineers, are problem solvers. We solve problems with software. That's it.
Yeah,
Try to solve your
that's
own
very good
problem.
example. That's a very
Yeah.
good example indeed.
It is. It is. Antonio, you said that you had some an answer there too.
Yeah. Just some context first.
Yeah.
So I work in a company in the beginning of my career. There's a partner from Oracle, and here in Brazil they sell this system like for the big retailers in Brazil, and it's a software that solves the supply chain from the retailers. And the software is very old school. So the interface is desktop. You don't have like libraries to automate things. And at the time, I was in the client side, working as a tester. So I was like the devil's advocate. My team sent the stuff to me, then I have to test, then pass to the client. And one thing that I have to do in there is, for example, I have to create some steps in the system. It's very repetitive. Every time I have to do the same steps. And we can't use some libraries like Selenium and stuff like that because it was desktop. And the tools at the time was like just you can record your screen and repeat tests, but this was not what I need because I need to integrate with the database to get some stuff from there. So I start to research and I find this library. It's called Sikuli X. It's a library based on OpenCV for the ones who already work in the computer vision. So this guy gets the OpenCV, embed into a Python library, and you could automate steps in screen in the way that use image recognition. So you don't need to record your steps, you just need the images of what you want in the screen. So you can programmatically say, hey, clicking OK button, clicking this test field and enter this text. So I create a huge script for automation, and every time that they send me the code and I need to do the same steps, I just run the script. And it was a nice case because this became like a product for this company that I work. So it's pretty good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think part of Eric's question that I had tossed up there is similar to this one, which we probably don't have the time to get into. But I will say the last KMF episode that we did is on YouTube, and we cover a ton of stuff about LinkedIn tips and CV tips. But truly, it does relate to what we're talking about, because I mean that is it. If you're curious and want to write code and have itches that need scratch, things you want to fix, I mean, just getting started, learning, putting it on your own personal GitHub. And then, there's plenty you can do on LinkedIn, which, like I said, we don't have the time to get into, but it is documented on X Team's YouTube page. There's plenty that you truly can do to really put your portfolio out there, even if they're small projects. A lot of small projects add up, and also a small doesn't mean that it's insignificant. A small project can be written beautifully and maintained beautifully, and any developer, anyone that's hiring will be able to see that. So I know we don't have the time to address it, but I wanted to throw that one up there just because I do like getting these questions, because I appreciate them coming in. But Yeah, I mean, Victor, I know you have to run here pretty soon. I believe you got a meeting coming up. But I want to thank all of you for being here. I really do appreciate it. This is a great chat. Python, I think, is just a really cool language, and really appreciate you guys being here. Like I said, we're active on both YouTube and LinkedIn for all kinds of content like this. So if you're watching on one, go check out the other, and vice versa. But yeah, for KMFcast, all about Python. Thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah.